And now I'm joined again by Jimmy Stein, BamaOnLine senior expert. We're gonna call you a senior expert today, Jimmy, because you're gonna have to bring your
I'm old.
hat. You got to put your senior expert hat on to evaluate this Alabama Texas game. I'm sure you haven't given it any second thought since the game ended on Saturday night, right?
It's come up. It's come up. I've noticed it. It's been discussed on the message board some.
Yeah, a couple of people have had some thoughts and things to say. Alabama 24, Texas 34, double-digit home loss for Alabama. That doesn't happen often in the Nick Saban era, or it hadn't happened often in the Nick Saban era. Exactly. First time. There's been a lot of firsts lately, and I think that fans are starting to grow concerned because not only was it a loss, I mean, in other games that Alabama has struggled in or lost, going on the road to Texas A&M, losing that game, going on the road and playing Tennessee, going on the road and playing LSU, you lose on 2-point conversions, you lose on last-second field goals. Maybe your defense really struggles. The home crowd certainly plays a factor. Anxiety has been an issue that has been brought up, by Nick Saban last year with last year's team. But at the same time, when you compare that to this, Texas was clearly a better football team, or they clearly played like the better football team on Saturday night. And that is not something that you say often. I mean, obviously that national championship game against Clemson in 2018, you came away thinking Clemson, Alabama did some things to shoot itself in the foot and made some key errors early. I do think there's kind of some similarities between that early interception from Tua Tagovailoa in that game and the early interception from Jalen Milroe in this game. The key difference to me is, the response to that. Jalen ended up having an even worse interception. Tua was typically a guy who bounced back strong. Now, we will get into this further, but Jalen Milroe also had some bounce back ability, I guess is what you would call it. The ability to respond. And there's a lot of factors that go into this, but just as far as the Texas game is concerned, watching it live, what we were kind of take me through your thought process, what you were thinking, and then also going back and watching the tape. Have you changed your thoughts on anything that you saw initially?
Yeah, the tape, and this is typical for me all the time, no matter in an Alabama win, no matter the opponent, I generally feel a little bit better after watching the tape. Actually, I think when you watch it live, emotions take over a lot. You're kind of, like any emotional fan, experiencing the ups and downs of a close game. The tape allows you to sort of take a more analytical approach. But generally, Clint, I mean, we can talk about individual performances next, but I think there are two primary problems the team had Saturday. And the question is, can these things be fixed or are they fatal? And if they're fatal by that, I mean, if these things aren't fixed, there'll be more losses. And those two things specifically on offense, this team's got to run the ball better. For all the talk about changing quarterbacks, and I'm not against that. I'm for anything Coach Saban thinks is best for the team. But it doesn't matter whether you go to Tyler Buckner, Ty Simpson, or bring back Bryce Young. The team has to be able to run the ball better than they did and better than they have been. No back on the team has 100 yards collectively on the season. The running back production, which I thought would be really good, hasn't been good at all. I think to some extent, there's been a commitment or an attempt to run the ball. There certainly was in the first half, and some of it was okay. But for this Alabama team to have a lot of success, the running game can't just be okay. It needs to be really good. And it hasn't been. Because if you can't run the ball, and I know this oversimplifies things to the point of elementary school, Clint, but there's only two ways to move the football. You either do it on the ground or you do it through the air. And if you can't do it through the ground, then you have to do it through the air. And I don't think that's the recipe for success for Milroe, for Buckner, or for Simpson at this juncture in their careers right now. So you've got to be able to run the ball, or the offense just isn't going to be productive. On defense, it's the air issue. By that I mean I think Alabama against the run's been pretty good. They haven't played 1995 Nebraska yet, but I think against the run they've been good. It's against the pass that's a big problem because they were completely unable to generate pressure against Quinn Ewers and Texas Saturday. And again, any success will not be sustainable this season without a better pass rush. So unless Alabama runs the ball better on offense and attacks the passer better on defense, that won't be the only loss. And I think all the other suggested changes by fans are just window dressing until those two huge issues are addressed. And I think those are the two reasons Alabama didn't win that game Saturday. They didn't control the game on the ground offensively, and they didn't pressure Ewers well enough on defense.
Well, I will say, I mean, and there's a lot more issues than Jalen Milroe. You are 1,000% correct. One of the issues outside of Jalen Milroe, I think, caused it, but it's not his fault that no one else can overcome the adversity. It is not his job solely. He made a mistake. Sometimes guys are going to make crucial mistakes. Quandarius Robinson tried to jump on a punt return last year against Tennessee. That was a critical mistake. Everybody is capable of completely changing the outcome of a game. If you're on the field, you have the possibility of switching momentum, giving the other team some sort of advantage. And Jalen Milroe did that early in the game. I will say, and Nick Saban, I mean, I've said it from the end of the game before I heard anything from Nick Saban. Watching that game, the first couple of series, I thought exactly what I was predicting. I'm sorry. What I had predicted going in was that Alabama was going to use this as an opportunity, a statement game. They were going to hit Texas in the mouth. They were going to run the football and announce themselves as back as Alabama. They were going to be physical defensively. And I will say defensively, you saw the big hits. Maybe they were giving up a little bit, but they were out there. They were playing with a lot of energy, a lot of aggression. They were excited, ready to be out there. The offense was having success running the football. It was kind of what we expected it to be, or I expected it to be. The interception on the first drive changed everything. And that starts with Jalen Milroe, but that's not completely Jalen Milroe's fault, because you want to know who I think was the number one person affected by that? I don't think it was Jalen Milroe. I think it was Tommy Rees. Tommy Rees, in that moment, I think he did not respond well at all. He felt like it was like he immediately took that one poor decision and he decided, I'm completely handcuffed in how I call this game moving forward. And it's like, if that's how you feel, and I'm not saying that, I'm not guaranteed, that's how it comes off. And I have seen nothing that disputes that. And if that's how you feel, you need to get somebody else out there. I mean, or you need to get a new offensive coordinator, which you're not going to do at this point in the season. I still think Tommy Rees is a good play caller. I still believe in his ability to get this shit right. But in that moment, he did not. I mean, you could even you tell quarterbacks or any player have the right body language. And it's funny to see the way Tommy Rees was behaving in the press box when they showed him and showed Jalen Milroe on the phone with him. It's kind of comical, but it's also not what you want. Like, do you not think that Jalen Milroe and every player has come across Tommy Rees acting that way in the box and the frustration? And he looks defeated. And how early, I mean, it just, to me, I don't think that he responded well. And I think that was reflected in the players. But it goes beyond that, too. No one really responded too well. And so that is my main concern, Jimmy.
Well, it's not fair to speak for Tommy Rees or to assume this, because it's such a giant assumption. I get on fans sometimes on the message board for assuming too much. They assume things and then take it as fact when all they're doing is assuming. And here I am doing that same thing right now that I get upset with others for doing. But I just say this because I think this is a fair assumption, or it makes some sense type assumption. It's fair to assume Tommy Rees might want Tyler Buchner to be the quarterback. I mean, that's the kid he knows. That's the kid he's coached. That's the kid he brought here. That's a common thing for people to say in the industry with assistant coaches is, that's his boy. That's his guy. That's his kid. That's his kid. Well, Tommy Rees inherited Jalen Milroe. He even inherited Ty Simpson. He even inherited Dylan Lonergan and Eli Holstein, who were committed and signed before Tommy Rees got to Tuscaloosa. But Tyler Buchner is Tommy's kid. That's his guy. Buckner's here because Tommy's here. And I do not believe by any stretch of the imagination that Tyler Buchner would be at Alabama right now if Tommy Rees was not Alabama's offensive coordinator. So I wonder if some of that obvious frustration that you're talking about, it's an excellent observation. And I think it may add to the frustration if Tommy Rees believes another kid should be the quarterback. But again, that's an assumption. That's something I'm assuming. It may not be true at all. And it may be that when it came time to pick the starting quarterback, Reese and Saban were completely 100% in sync with that. But we just know who makes the decisions at Alabama of such important things. It's Nick Saban decides who starts the game, and not just at the quarterback position, at all the positions.
What?
So,
Well,
but that gets to exactly what you're saying about Tommy Rees's frustration, and I agree 1,000,000% that that's a great observation, and I can't help but agree looking at Tommy's face in the box.
yeah, I mean, it's just that's something that you can't. That's not the body language you want to portray. And what it is, I don't know that he realized that he was going to be on TV. Like if you're on the sidelines, you should assume. I mean, you can be seen by a lot of people. Him up in the box. I mean, it might have been the only time he did that. But it's not the body language that you want to portray, because he looked straight up defeated. And I will say, if you are correct, which you say it's an assumption, it is an assumption. So I don't want to speak on any of this as if it is fact. But if you were correct, he would not be the first offensive coordinator that wanted a different quarterback than the starting quarterback. There were a lot of rumors that Brian DeBall wanted Tua Tagovailoa a lot sooner, and he wasn't able to get that. And it was like he felt, and I will say that Brian DeBall ended up being correct. I mean, when you look at it, Tua Tagovailoa for that particular season, it's clear at any point, and I even will say, even in Lincoln Riley's offense and all the great things that Jalen did at Oklahoma, you're talking about college quarterbacks, I still say Tua Tagovailoa was the better player. It finished a lot closer than it was in 2017, though. But my point is that he was correct in wanting Tua for that offense and what he wanted to do. But I also think that at times when you want another guy, you're kind of feeling, I guess we'll continue to say it. You're kind of feeling defeated going in because you feel like there's a better option for you, and
Right.
you feel like in some ways you're a little bit handcuffed going into the game. And I
Right.
don't know, that causes problems. Alabama's got some problems right now. And what I will say, and we'll continue to talk about Milrow, and we're going to get into all this. This is probably going to be pretty long, but I think my problem with how I predict Alabama games or how I approach Alabama games, I'm applying old principles to the current mindset, the current staff, I mean, even Nick Saban. It feels like he's changed a little bit in his mindset. I don't know to what degree, but used to, there were certain principles that you could apply. Last year, going into the Texas A&M game, you thought Alabama was going to drum Texas A&M for two reasons. A, Jimbo went after Saban, and you don't go after Saban. Players are going to make him pay. They're going to make A&M pay. And it was the fact that they had beat them the year before in College Station. Fans stormed the field. Used to, that was an automatic. You're catching a beat down the next time you get on the field. It's revenge. Revenge Alabama is sweet Alabama. And you saw last year how much of that was Bryce Young being out, and you got to have your backup quarterback in. How much is it that just those principles you can no longer apply in these given situations? Alabama, I made the same mistake last year in some games of, this is a chance for Alabama to make a statement. I did that again this year. This is a chance. You're trying to get physical, big up front, run the football, make a statement, announce to the college football world that you are back. And I think that was the plan, but the execution of said plan, I think that has diminished quite a bit over the last few years.
Yeah, it's I would agree with anyone that says, hey, this isn't 2020, this isn't 2018, this isn't 2017. What's wrong? Well, probably quite a bit, but it's also was really difficult to be that good and stay that good. And I think that we're seeing that now. A couple of points. Number one, Tim Watts at BOL, I think he put this really well the other day when he said, first of all, this was not Texas State. This was Texas. And it's not just Texas. This is a really good Texas team. We, in all of our critiques of Alabama, we have failed to give Texas their proper credit for how good they are. Football can be 11 different one-on-one matchups going on at one time. That's not exactly how the game is played, but it's played sort of like that. And in those 11 one-on-one matchups, Alabama is matched up against a lot of guys that are going to be playing football for a very long time and making a lot of money doing it. That was a really good football team. It's a team that could make the playoff and contend for a national championship. So Alabama losing by 10 points to a top 4 type team shouldn't be something that sets off alarms everywhere. But what is alarming is the fact that there's a few trends. And again, it's not one player. It's you can't run the ball when you've worked on it for months. You can't pressure the passer when 2 years ago you led the entire nation in sacks. Now you can't get to the quarterback at all, and you didn't do a good enough job of that a year ago, even though you had one of the best pass rushers in school history on the team. Uh, there's just a few, admittedly, alarming trends. But again, losing to Texas by 10 isn't the end of the world. There's going to be a lot of teams that lose to Texas by more than 10 this season. They're a very good team. We don't have to go over all their dudes. I did say last week, even though I predicted an Alabama win, I said a lot like last week, I don't know that Alabama's going to play a team all year that's got more dudes than Texas does. Texas may lead our schedule in dudes more than LSU, more than Tennessee, more than Texas A&M. Texas has a lot of starters, and not just starters, but guys that have been there. They do have a couple of transfers that I think really put them over the top. Catalan at safety, Mitchell at wide receiver, ironically, the Georgia transfer. I think those guys help put them over the top, but their core of players, Ford, the 2 defensive tackles, the left tackle, Worthington, Sanders, who's really the best tight end in the world, not named Brock Bowers, and of course, Quinn Ewers. One final point about Ewers is I was asked repeatedly by one guy on the board, and that's fine, about Jimmy, you have to admit that if you switch quarterbacks, Alabama wins this game. And I thought, well, yeah, if Alabama had a junior quarterback that was very experienced and had played in a lot of big games and was valued even by the NFL, yes, that's going to make Alabama a better team. That's what Alabama had last year, a junior quarterback that was valued by the NFL, that was a mature player and had played well in college games on a huge stage. So Alabama doesn't have that this year. Alabama's got a young quarterback making his 3rd start. And there was always going to be some level of issue because of that. But the failure to run the ball on offense and rush the passer on defense, to me, those are more fatal flaws that if those aren't fixed, it doesn't matter who the quarterback is.
Well, and this is why I say that Tommy Rees kind of didn't respond well after the interception. He became way too predictable in my mind. This was not an automatic guaranteed, but it's close enough to me where if you're Texas, you can assume some things pre-snap that's not even being presented necessarily. And I don't think that that's good. I think you put yourself in a natural disadvantage. And that is, okay, especially after the first interception. If it's first down, Alabama's running the football. And based on how well they do on that run, will determine if they're going to run or throw on the second down. If they pick up 4 or 5 yards or more than that, they're going to run the next play. If they don't, if it's 2nd and 7 or longer, they're throwing the football. And so I think that Texas very quickly, and this is why I think that the offensive line was at a natural disadvantage. Not natural, it was very man-made, but was at a significant disadvantage, was that Texas, and I think to some degree you're always trying to do this, but it was a huge emphasis on let's win first down. Because if we win first down, they are not doing anything that's too crazy or ludicrous. They were sending a lot of run blitzes on early downs. Sometimes it was second down, but a lot of times it's first down. Put Alabama behind the sticks on first down, and we've got them. This drive and now, granted, there was a couple of plays where Jalen Milroe made it was a run, it was a pass, things like that, and they were able to convert. And on those drives, they would typically slowly make their way down the field. You started seeing some explosive plays. And why I think you started seeing the explosive plays is Tommy Reese in the second half got out of that a little bit, where he started saying, okay, let's start taking some shots. They're expecting us to do certain things in certain situations. And it was to me, it was not necessarily how Texas would align pre-snap, where they would show, hey, we know you're throwing or we know you're passing, but players, I think, they had a natural flow of what Alabama was doing. And so they kind of knew what to expect. Doesn't mean that they couldn't get caught off guard in rare situations, but you're not trying to win necessarily every single snap with that approach. You just got to win a majority of them because Alabama's offense is not built in a way where it's going to make you pay, and it can, which we did see some explosive plays downfield, and we'll get to that in a second. But that's where I think Alabama really went wrong. Their offensive line, essentially, and really their offense in general, Texas had a good feel for what Alabama would be trying to do on any given play. And I think that they were shocked that Alabama didn't have more designed quarterback runs for Jalen Milroe. Even Steve Sarkisian going into the game was like, yeah, they didn't do a whole lot of that. We know that they didn't want to show a whole lot of that. We get it. And so they were expecting it. And how many did you get? I mean, a couple, a few throughout the entire game. It wasn't a lot. And so that concerns me as well, Jimmy.
Well, Matt Zenit's the outstanding reporter at On3, one of the best in the business. He had a good reporter story yesterday, talking to anonymous officials inside Texas football. And per that story, Texas felt that they had a couple of good tells, and it lines up exactly with what Clint is saying. It seemed that Texas had a good feel for when Alabama was running and throwing, and that can be Tommy Rees's play calling, Tommy Rees's early frustration. It can also be tells by the way the offensive line or running backs line up and the way they align their feet. It can be a tell to Texas about whether a run or a pass is coming, and Texas certainly defended the plays as if they knew what was coming at times. So it makes Clint's Clint's take. It makes Zenit's story. It makes all of that seem very real because Texas looked very prepared. They looked like they knew what was coming and defended it in that way. Now there were some good things too. That can get lost. Sometimes when you play well against a Middle Tennessee, you didn't do some things well, and no one pays enough attention because you won the game 56-7, so nobody pays attention. The opposite is true, Clint, in these losses, where you lose the game, so it's a disaster, and no one pays attention to the fact that, hey, there were some good signs here. And the number one good sign to me, and it gets back to what you're just saying, Alabama's outside playmakers showed up to some extent. I felt, the very best game by Alabama's wide receiver core since JMO and Metch were here. I mean, I'm not saying it was as good as that. It wasn't the Devontae, Judy, Ruggs group. I'm not saying that either. I'm just saying it's the best it's been since then. I felt Kobe Prentice, who was an offensive staff player of the game, really stepped up. I think Jermaine Burton played maybe his best game at Alabama, and he was only credited with 2 catches. That's because it was his 2 touchdowns that were called back because of penalty. But Jermaine Burton was great. Malik Benson made a fantastic third down athletic play, 2 catches, great plays by Benson,
fourth down too.
Prentice,
the fourth down,
and Isaiah Bond on the fourth down. Isaiah Bond, to me, has turned the corner now from, wow, as a freshman, we thought, that kid's got a chance. And now it's a sophomore year, and it's like, you know what? I think he's a dude. I think he's a dude right now. And so I think Bond has turned the corner. I think Benson's going to be as good as advertised. We know Prentice could be a high volume guy. And Jermaine Burton sort of played like that senior leader we'd like him to be. So that can get lost a little bit. James Burnip had the best day for an Alabama punter since J.K. Scott was in school. And I'll end on my soliloquy here. Now I misuse that term all the time. On James Burnip and Jalen Milroe, because a lot of people, you're looking at James Burnip and Jalen Milroe, and you're like, what do you mean those two have in common? I think they do have something in common. And that's, Burnip wasn't a good player in 2021. He wasn't. He wasn't a good player. He may have been, I'd have to go back and look at the stats, Clint, but he may have been the worst punter in the league in 2021. He was certainly closer to the bottom than the top. And then last year, he was pretty good. He was okay. I think he went from, geez, that's not very good to, well, that's okay. That's okay. We can live with a punter like this. Now he's a dude. It took 2 years of development for James Burnup's talent to win out. And that's exactly what happened. Eventually, his talent made him the best punter in this league. And I'm telling you guys that he is. And he may be a top 5 punter nationally, even with a whole year of eligibility left. Um, I think Milroe is probably a real similar story. We're just probably to some extent in 2021, James Burnip here, maybe to some extent a little of 2022, but Milroe is a developmental prospect. And I just don't think Alabama, or especially Alabama fans, but not even Alabama, is going to be satisfied with that. They're not going to wait on the James Burnip thing. We had to wait on the punter, and it paid off. I just don't think that's going to happen at the QB position for Alabama. I think there's just too much impatience. I think there's too much, no, 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 no. We got to win all the games now. We can't wait on that. But I do think Burnup's a good lesson for football fans that, hey, when a kid's got extreme talent, give him enough time and it's going to, but I don't think Miller will be given that time. Not here. That's just my stark, blunt opinion.
Here's the thing about the Jalen Milroe situation and just kind of how people have responded and my thoughts. It's so strange how Alabama called that game because I don't think they called a game that really fit Jalen Milroe. Now, here's the thing. I think you're very limited in what you can call that fits Jalen Milroe right now, but you didn't see any of it. I wouldn't say any, but you didn't see enough where you can say, okay, this was the game plan. But here's the thing, though. Nick Saban has kind of been telling us all offseason to expect this. And what I mean by that is when Nick Saban was asked about the running backs, what would he say? Oh, incredible group, deep group, probably one of the best position groups on the team. You ask about the receivers. Man, really like those receivers. Then we got a lot of talent there. We want to have a quarterback that gets our playmakers the football, get it in their hands. So when I see people say, you need to build an offense around Jalen Milroe, what are you doing by doing that? You're taking away from what you feel like is two of your strengths of your offense because every carry that Jalen Milroe gets is a carry that's not going to your running backs. And if you got a deep group, a deep stable, right now, with Jalen Milroe as the quarterback, there's not room to rotate 4 running backs, period. You're seeing Roydell Williams. You're seeing Jace McClellan. You're not seeing a whole lot else. Alabama in the past, they've been able to work in maybe a third guy, but you certainly can't utilize 4. That's not enough touch, distribution for a wide number of players. But every time you call a pass, which happened a lot against Texas, it's going to happen with a dual threat quarterback. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that he wasn't getting protection. It's not like this is all Jalen's fault that he's running, but every time you call a pass and Jalen takes off and runs, that's a target that's not going to your receivers that you want to go to your receivers. Get the football into the hands of your playmakers. So what you're essentially doing, no offense to Jalen, I think that any quarterback that is out there, you look at Alabama's offense this year and you say, what is the weakest position or the biggest concern? It's quarterback. It's not receiver. The offensive line was very concerning. We'll get to Seth McLaughlin here in a minute. That's a big problem. That was not good at all. But offensive line, I think Alabama has felt good about the progression of that group and what it can be when you're not the offensive line's not built for what happened on Saturday night. I'll tell you that right now. And we'll get into that more later as well. But the wide receiver room, feel good about the development of the tight end room, several guys, receiver. So essentially quarterback is the weakest position on your offense. So what you're doing by building an offense around Jalen Milroe is you're taking away from 2 of your top positions that you feel really good about, and you're giving that to the weakest position. And you're putting the ball in the hands of the weakest position, which is going to happen because it's the quarterback. But if you have somebody who is, even if they're making, some mistakes, they're not always making the right reads. They're not, if you have somebody that's willing to stand back there and deliver the football and get the football in the hands of your playmakers, you're at least getting that aspect that you want out of your offense. And the way that I saw Tommy Rees calling that game, or at least the approach, and not having a whole lot of scripted runs for Jalen Milroe, it was that was the goal. Is we want the football in the hands of other people that we've said it all offseason what we want, and the game was called that way. And so I say you either need to scrap that and by building an offense around Jalen Milroe in a lot of ways, that is what you're going to get. But if that's the best way to win football games, you got to do it. You don't have a choice. And I don't know what the quarterback room is behind Jalen Milroe. The coaching staff, they know a lot more than I do, but they either need to build the offense around Milroe or they need to get somebody else in there.
I really like that, and I really, and that makes a ton of sense. And since Alabama's a basketball school now, to use a basketball analogy, uh, that's a joke. There's two types of point guards. What they say, there's the point guard that's a distributor, with an excellent example being Bryce Young. That's why I was the first pick in the draft. And some point guards, they're really good, but they're scorers. Maybe they're the leading scorer on your team. The point
Colin
guard
Sexton
is, because that's the guy with the ball in his hands, and he's a good scorer. Well, I think Milroe's a lot more like Sexton, and I'm not saying he's going to have the success that Sexton's had in pro sports. I'm not making that analogy. What I'm saying is, I think Bryce was a great distributor that could really bring up the whole team, because he would get the ball to his receivers in a place where they could make a play with it and sort of rise the level of the whole team. If the offensive line was going to struggle, Bryce like, hey, no problem, I'll get rid of the ball quicker. Bryce could just sort of lift the play of the entire team. I think Milroe's more of a point guard scorer. He's the playmaker. He's the guy. And what he can do when look, that touchdown pass to Jermaine Burton was ridiculous. That was a great, great throw. There isn't a starting quarterback in the NFL, all 32 guys, even the guys named Mahomes and Josh Allen, who wouldn't look at that pass and go, oh, I'll take that throw. I'll put that one on my resume too. That throw, and that's what is so frustrating maybe about the Jalen Milroe experience, is that you do get that with the bad. So the capability is there. He's a scoring point guard. That's exciting. It's exciting when the guy with the ball in his hands is the one that can make the most spectacular play. That's exciting. But like you were saying, Clint, the best players at that position, in my opinion, with Bryce being a great example, they lift the play of everyone because they distribute the ball to the other playmakers. There's 5 basketball players. When you're making the other 4 guys great, defend those 4. It's easier to defend 1 than 4. And that's kind of, I think, what Alabama's got right now is the best playmaker is the quarterback. That doesn't mean that it's the smartest thing to build it around. The smartest thing to build it around is Bond and Benson and Brooks and Burton and Prentice and Law, and that deep running back group, and Knobloch, who we also haven't talked about enough. Knobloch's on his way towards a Sanders, sort of a Sanders type career. To me, it was just kind of like watching the upperclassman Sanders play the lowerclassman Sanders. I mean, Amari's still got another year or 2 in the incubator, but he's going to be that type of player like Jatavion Sanders. So there's a lot of good. Look, there's a lot of good that Milroe does, but in the end, it has to be about winning the game, and that means fewer negative plays by the quarterback, and that means more production from the running backs, and it means getting to the passer on defense. Alabama's got to do all of those things, or there's going to be another Texas result on the schedule.
Yeah, and you look at it. I think a lot of people who know what they're talking about. I think if you're getting dynamic play out of the running back position, even if you have a dual threat quarterback, it's great. Like I certainly don't think it hurts anything, and it certainly is better than just getting mediocre play. But my point is that you can survive with mediocre play at the running back position when you have a dual threat quarterback. Like look at the Eagles. I mean, Kenneth Gainwell the other day. I mean, Kenneth Gainwell, a very undersized player. That Eagles backfield since Jalen took over, it does not require a dynamic running back. They let Miles Sanders had a great year last year. He turned into a good player before that. That Eagles offense was still doing well. They didn't have to get that, but they were getting it. That's great. but they let him walk in free agency because they understand that that is not in their offense with Jalen Hurts. It's not a necessity to have that caliber of player. So they let him walk. They save money on that front. Now, granted, they go out and they trade for DeAndre Swift. They give up a mid-round pick, nothing a ton, and he's on a rookie contract. So it's like we can still get a upper echelon running back, and we didn't give up a whole lot, and he's cheap, where we can pay other positions that we value more. But on top of that, he barely saw any action on Sunday. Like, I mean, it was the Kenneth Gainwell show. So, I mean, it wasn't Rashad Penny. It wasn't DeAndre Swift. My point is that the Colts have kind of viewed Jonathan Taylor being one of the best running backs in the league. We got Anthony Richardson. We brought over the guy from the Eagles who was kind of running that same system with Jalen Hurts. If you are going to have that as your approach, the necessity of the running back position, and you certainly don't want to give it a large sum of money because no one around the NFL wants to pay running backs right now. But especially if you've got that aspect of having a dual threat quarterback, a dynamic player at quarterback. The Baltimore Ravens are another one. You got Lamar Jackson. J.K. Dobbins stays hurt every year, and I hate it for him. I really do. But that entire group, they don't have a dynamic player at that position because it's not a necessity. So my point is that if you feel like your running back room is the best in the country or one of the best and one of the deepest, who cares if you've got Jalen Milroe as your starter? It wasn't even something that you really needed. So it's like you would rather have that dynamic running back room that still gives you a dominant run game, but then somebody that can complement that with being able to move the football through the air. And that is something on a down-to-down basis that Jalen Milroe is really struggling with right now. And it's not just phenomenal deep ball. I mean, you were right, man. There was some of these is just, I mean, it is breathtakingly good deep ball on some of these.
It's almost strange, isn't it, to see a quarterback whose best throw is that?
Oh, yeah.
It's normally completely the opposite.
And granted,
a lot more,
and you know, Blake Sims was a lot that way. The closer you got to the line of scrimmage, the more he seemed to struggle as far as you know, ball placement and accuracy. But I will say that the deep one, and you had that element, you had the dual threat ability, you had the stable of running backs, and you had the ability to press vertically, and that can be a winning combination, but not against the Texas caliber teams. Did that work against Ohio State? Not really. Alabama lost that year. So as good as Blake Sims was, you play some really good teams, and sometimes you face the right team that can win on early downs. And then go ahead.
Milroe's got like that's again part of the frustration is I think if you ask most offense coordinators, hey, if I gave you a quarterback that runs a 4.4 and he's 220 pounds, but he also throws a beautiful deep ball, you think you can build something with that? I think almost every offense coordinator in the country would take that combination. And I know he struggles with the short and intermediate stuff in terms of accuracy. So there's somebody out there right now that says, "Oh, well, why can't you go just sign the guy that runs the 4.4 and throws the deep ball and is good at all the throws?" And I'm like, who in the world is that?
Show me that
I'm
guy.
not sure that person exists even in the NFL. You know, you can build around Milroe. I just think he's a developmental guy, and it's going to take a minute. It's going to take a while. And at Alabama, we don't take a while. So, you know, I think this has been most of the conversation on our message board. Certainly, you'd asked about interviews a lot, and that's what's Alabama going to do at quarterback. And I think we're now, just my opinion, and I'm guessing this isn't scoop. I think they're going to start transitioning to Tyler Buckner and not wait on Milroe's development to take place or to fully for Jalen to fully develop. Just my word of warning here to fans that are excited when they hear me say that. Oh, thank goodness! Unless Alabama gets better running the football and starts playing a little bit better, getting after the passer, I'm not sure this fixes. I'm not sure this fixes much. Buckner's been highly turnover prone himself, so there's that, and he doesn't have Milroe's deep ball. He is a very good athlete though with his legs. I'm just not as optimistic as others that this is that this is quote the answer that's going to change everything. I think it will change some things and some things for the better.
Well, and this is where I think a lot of fans, anybody that's still wanting Ty Simpson, this is where that comes into play. Because when it comes to, I think, decision making, you're going to see some lapses in judgment. Is it as rough as some of the decisions that we saw from Jalen Milroe on Saturday? I don't know. Maybe not. I mean, there's a wide range between some of the decisions that we saw from him and just simply making a poor decision. Like, you can just say, that was not the best decision to make right there. Uh, and so I definitely think that you're going to get some of that. You would get some of that from Ty Simpson. But I think from a down to down accuracy standpoint, it's like there were some throws that Jalen Milroe completed that you say, okay, but if he puts the ball in a better location, the receiver or the running back, I mean, I'm thinking of Roydell Williams out of the backfield on one that was, I think, in the red area, if I'm not mistaken. It was close enough where I remember him catching it and saying if he hits him in stride and he didn't have to like spin it and bring it in, that's probably a touchdown. And I think Alabama settled for a field goal on that drive, if I'm not mistaken. And it's like, these are the kind of things, it's not just getting the ball to the receiver. It's if you believe in because a lot of these guys can win vertically. Isaiah Bond can do it. Jermaine Burton can do it. He's proven that. You've got a vertical, seam buster with Amari Black at tight end. I think Kobe Prentice can do it. Obviously Malik Benson was known as one of those guys coming out of JUCO. There's so many, but there are also guys who can create yardage after the catch, and they're dynamic playmakers. And so you want a quarterback who can and this was the thing with Bryce Young. This was certainly a thing with Tua Tagovailoa with that stable of receivers that he had. And he's still doing it in the NFL. They went and got him a couple of guys who can do that, who can create yardage after the catch. Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill. Tua's job is to get them the football consistently and get them the football in a place where they have the best opportunity to create yardage after the catch. And this is an area that I think that Jalen Milroe is still struggling. And when I say that the turnovers are a major issue, the reason I say that is he started 3 games, but 2 games against Power 5 opponents. And in those 2 games, he has committed 5 turnovers. And 4 of those 5 turnovers have directly led to 24 points by the opposing team. That's an average of almost 2 touchdowns per game. That cannot happen. You can't put yourself behind like that and expect to win football games, and especially when you want momentum and you want to dominate. These are the kind of things that you can't do. And even the best quarterbacks, Tua makes that mistake against Clemson. Alabama loses that game. Mac makes a terrible throw. I think one of the interceptions against Auburn in the Iron Bowl was just fluky. You can't blame him for it. And if these were the kind of interceptions that Milroe was throwing, I wouldn't have much to say. Hey, it's unfortunate. Those things happen. But, Mac had a terrible throw, and Alabama ends up losing that game. They're even just making one is extremely hard to overcome. You do it on the very first drive of the game, and then you do it at one of the most critical points in the game where you set Texas up to create separation you couldn't overcome late in the game. So that's why I say it has to get cleaned up. And if that's Milroe, that's totally fine. But it's got to get resolved, just like the snap issues need to get resolved. Jimmy, this is a big problem. This isn't just, this guy's missing some blocks. It's not just, hey, the snaps are a little bit off. It's like one of these, and somehow Jalen Milroe is making some miraculous plays with these poor snaps. I mean, they're being rolled back there, and he's throwing touchdowns with it. He's running touchdowns. He's converting 3rd and 17s. Give him a lot of credit for that aspect. But these are things that you can't have with your offense, because even just a poor snap location where the quarterback has to move and get it, that's throwing the timing and the rhythm of your offense off. So you're putting him at a disadvantage. But you're also, the how bad the snaps are is like you're going to turn the football over that way, and then it doesn't matter what Jalen Milroe's doing; those things will get you beat.
Oh, no question, that's true. And Jalen does a pretty good job, like you said, of overcoming what could have been a really bad situation right from the snap, literally. And that's something that's got to be fixed. It's some things are just non-sustainable. Somehow that hasn't really hurt us. Somehow it's going to. You can just chisel that in stone, particularly when you change quarterbacks and have a less athletic guy back there than Milroe, who obviously plays a little shortstop too, in addition to playing quarterback, because he's making some shortstop level, ground balls that he's picking up back there and then doing something with it. That can't work. The left tackle really struggled against Texas a lot. He's a freshman. I said all summer long. I mean, I'm like, when it was apparent that a couple of true freshmen were going to play, I'm like, that's great. Talent wins out. Play the best player. But every freshman has his struggle game. You just hope it's only one, but every freshman's got one. Let's hope that was just it for Caden. There, it may be more than one. That's the case with a lot of freshmen. You just don't play this game without being humbled. You don't play it without being humbled, and Alabama plays it at the highest level that's not in the NFL. So you're playing against premium talent. So you'll be humbled as a freshman. Caleb Downs was beat for at least one score in this game. Maybe it wasn't Downs' best game either, but he also did some good things. As Proctor did some good things too. Boy, long way to go with this team. After the South Florida game, Clint, 7 straight SEC opponents, and the SEC schedule. It's not just about who you play; it's who you miss. And look who Alabama misses. No Vanderbilt. There's no Missouri on the schedule. I think that would be a really winnable game for Alabama. Florida, I hate saying that, but to me it looks true. It'd be a good year to play Florida, right? But you don't have Florida on the schedule. So Alabama's going to play 7 good to great SEC opponents in a row. So you got kind of 1 week to figure it out, and there is a lot to figure out, both from the way that you brought up earlier in the show, Tommy Reese calling the plays, from Milroe cutting down on game losing turnovers. And when two teams are evenly matched, and it can go either way. And let's remember, Alabama had a lead in this game late. Alabama led this game in the fourth quarter, but what decides close games? Turnovers. Alabama had 2, didn't force any, and the turnovers were bad. They directly led to points. I mean, those were bad. Some turnovers, because of where they take place on the field, or it's 3rd and 30 at midfield. I mean, some turnovers don't hurt. Seems that Milroe's turnovers often do, and against opponents that you're evenly matched with, it's gonna decide the outcome, and it did.
Yeah, it's Alabama's going to be one of those teams where they're probably going to play some games close, and that's fine. What can happen is what happened against Texas. I mean, until I see something different, you cannot get down by double-digit points. It's not a team right now that's built to overcome. And if it becomes that, it's going to take a huge collective effort from everyone. Quarterback, I still believe in the run game. I really do. I think if you fix some other aspects of your team, you have a complementary passing game, an offensive coordinator that doesn't, kind of, um, doesn't respond poorly to critical mistakes early in the game. A lot of factors, but you have to get better play out of your center. You can't have that the blocking and stuff, the communication, all that's great. Serviceable blocker, good communicator. You can't be making mistakes like that. That will get you beat every time. And it contributed. I mean, I wouldn't say that it contributed because Jalen Milroe did a lot to overcome it. You can't expect him to continue to overcome it. Eventually,
Right.
that will get you beat, whether the other aspects are fixed or not. Got to get that resolved. Got to be able to get a pass rush. I don't know what you got to do. You've got to figure out something to put more pressure on the quarterback. And just collectively as a defense, and this is the other thing I'll say, and this is why, a lot of people say the defense played well. And overall, I think they probably did. Had some breakdowns in coverage, but there were some really good aspects of the defensive play. But the most concerning part to me was you have a struggling offense that is struggling to score points. They had 5 scoring drives in the entire game, 3 field goals and 2 touchdowns. 2 of those field goals, one of them happened at the end of the first half to close it. The other happened at the beginning of the second half to open it. So there were 3 other scoring drives other than that. On all 3 of them, Jalen Milroe musters up enough to put points on the board for Alabama, and the defense immediately gives up a touchdown on the ensuing drive. So every time you start to cut into any sort of deficit or whatever, you're immediately having the opposing team respond. One time it was a field goal that Texas ended up separating by scoring a touchdown and creating another 4-point more gap. And then on other ones, it's Jalen Milroe's getting things going in the second half, scoring some points. The defense is immediately allowing Texas to maintain its lead or retake the lead or, create further separation. These are things that simply can't happen. So that's got to be resolved. You've got to play more complementary football. And one thing that we did not see, and we haven't seen in the last couple of years, you didn't see the offense playing well and the defense playing well at the same time. They've got to be able to get on the same page and got to be able to play complementary football. Jimmy, anything else before we hop out of here?
No, just excited to see the team, how they respond. I know it's South Florida. I know Alabama's a big favorite. It's still a road game, and I'm about to point this out on the message board soon. In the last 9 road games, Alabama hasn't played well at all, and I think they've had one easy win, and that was back in 2021 at Starkville. They beat Mississippi State pretty good after losing to A&M in College Station. That's been the only easy road win for Alabama in the last 9 tries. So I think just playing well on the road, even against South Florida, is going to help this team. And of course, I'm real curious to see what they do at quarterback. I just know this: it doesn't matter whether it's Miller or Buckner or Simpson. It needs to be better than it's been in terms of minimizing or negating the bad plays. But excited to see this team again. And again, 7 SEC games follow South Florida. So, boy, better get it turned around.
Yeah, that's another one of those kind of principles that you used to be able to apply is, man, I pity the next opponent after Alabama loses. Oh, God, they're going to catch it. And here recently, it just hadn't been as big of an issue. They've had some good games following losses, but they haven't, so I think that this is yet again, another opportunity to, get some of that back. And I'm not as confident that they're going to be able to. I've kind of applied these principles with the assumption eventually this is going to be the old Alabama and they're going to be able to have these same principles that they've always had. And I've been wrong every step of the way. So I'm not making the assumption anymore that that's going to happen, but it is an opportunity for them to, no offense to South Florida, but sorry. I mean, you're going to get smacked around for 4 quarters because Alabama's pissed off. And we'll see if that happens. If they struggle, I don't know. But they're still figuring some things out too. So Jimmy, as always, I appreciate you hopping on here with me. We don't do this as often anymore. I'm doing a lot more of the written content. I know you're still doing the Locked On Bama, and so you're still on the airways plenty. But I think periodically, at least once a week, we're going to try to get together and do one of these, and we'll see how things go. But as always, brother, I appreciate you hopping on here with me.
Yeah, it's awesome. Looking forward to it next week, and I'm sure we'll put out a show with Travis Reier this week too.
I'm loving doing those, by the way. I mean,
Yeah,
Travis is phenomenal. So if you haven't already, go subscribe to the BOL YouTube channel. Travis is doing phenomenal things. It's only going to continue to grow. So we appreciate you guys as always, and we will talk to you guys soon.